Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Let's chat about some books that I read in September. Now for the month of September, I read a total of 12 books, and I could have sworn I was going to be able to read all 18 books on my TBR, but I did not make it. I ran into a little bit of a slump in the middle of September. I don't know why. I guess with everything going on, we were looking at houses and filling out applications and being denied and all of that. I just couldn't concentrate. But being that I couldn't concentrate and I ran into a little bit of a slump, 12 books is not so bad. So I'm pretty happy with that. As you know, in September, we had the Magical Readathon, the beginning of the Magical Readathon, the Novice Path. So I was able to complete some of those books, which I am super excited about. And I was a little bit of an overachiever with those books. So we're going to start off with the books that I read for the Magical Readathon, and then we're going to go on from there. For this particular one, the Novice Path, all you had to do was complete 2 of those prompts, and you are considered a passing grade or a passing level to go on to the school. Of course, I wanted to complete all 7 of the paths on the map. I only got to complete 5 of those, which I'm pretty happy with. And then you also have 3 extra prompts, which were your character prompts. You get to build your own character, and according to whatever your character's abilities or characteristics are, then you read those 3 prompts. So you have the background, the province, and your heritage, which means where you're from, what you are, and where you live. And so for these 3, you really don't have to complete them right now. You have until April to complete these 3 prompts. I was able to complete 2 of the 3 of those. So I still have time to read that last one, which the one that I didn't get to was Heritage. I am actually working on the book for Heritage now, which was just, I'm an elf. I chose to be an elf, and so all I had to do was read a book with moon or stars on the cover. Like I said, I'm still working on that one, but I have until April. Now getting to the prompts that I did achieve. The first one being the first prompt, which is read a book with a map. For that, I decided to incorporate our Stacks of Strange pick, A Lesson in Vengeance. This does have a beautiful map at the front, as most fantasy novels have. This is a dark academia novel. There is a whole live show where we discuss our feelings and our thoughts about this book, so I won't talk too much about it other than I really enjoyed this book. I really wasn't sure what direction I was going to take it because I had mixed feelings. I know that I enjoyed my journey through reading this book, but there was a couple of flaws that I found within the character development and the actual characters themselves, like the age group. This is set in high school, so I believe the girls are about 15 or 16 years old, and they read more like college and university students, and we talk in the live how we sort of had to do that shift in our heads and not read it as if this was high school, but as if it was a college or university setting. And with that minor change that we did, Crystal was the one that actually mentioned it first, and I agreed with her, because if you make that shift in your head, you're able to enjoy it more, at least in our opinion. But it was a fantastic story. I love the dark elements. I loved not really so much the characters, like the girls themselves. They weren't that likable, but either way, I enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. I'll link the live show up above if you want to go ahead and take a look. The next prompt I was able to complete was the second stop on the map, which was the Ashthorn, which is a book from my TBR pile. I am looking at everything on my phone because I have all the prompts and everything written out here on my notes. For that, I decided to incorporate the Horror in 24 book that we read for the month of September, which was The Forgotten Island. And I felt so bad because I was the one that suggested this book, and like the majority of us, if not almost everybody, DNF'd it. The only ones that continued reading were Rain and myself, and Rain didn't finish it. So I was the only one that finished it. Nobody else was feeling it. Everybody was in a fall mood, which I get it. I was in a fall mood too, and I was sort of like hating myself for suggesting this book. But either way, I really did enjoy this one. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. Again, there's a whole live talking about this. We also talk about other things because granted, I was the only one that had finished it, so there was only so much that we could talk about. But I will leave it up above. Now, know that all these live shows have spoilers, so if you have not read these books, maybe only listen or watch up to the part where we get into spoilers. Basically, this is just about an island where they start building this resort, and somewhere as they're building this, a few of the men go missing into this like black hole. They almost get like sunken into this black hole, and anybody that goes to this island never comes back. It is said by the people in the neighboring towns or the neighboring island, I believe it's Thailand, that it said that this island is cursed, so nobody goes there because, again, nobody comes back. But somehow these young, I don't know if they're kids, I believe they're kids, they end up going to this island without knowing what was going on. They're hungry. They wake up in the middle of the sea on this boat after a night of like drinking and drugs, and they see this island and they see smoke coming off of this island, and they're like, maybe we could get some food there, and needless to say, they almost all die on this island. But I enjoyed it. It was a fun old time. This is a gory book. David Sodergren usually writes really gruesome, descriptive horror novels, and they all have like an 80s slasher vibe to them. I have read Night Shoot and Now the Forgotten Island, and I will say that I liked Night Shoot a lot more than this. Another thing that I want to say with this is that he is known to write very like male sex, misogynistic kind of scenes, or like men that just you want sex and talk about women's bodies. So if you don't like that, then I would steer clear. It doesn't bother me much, but it is very prominent, and it was a complaint that a lot of people that read with us had, that it was just like too much of like sex scenes, too much of like just males checking out women and wanting women and things like that. I found that to be very prominent also in Night Shoot, but not as much as this one. There was a character in Night Shoot that just kept on like trying to hit on women and talk about like women's bodies and stuff. But it's more prominent in this one for sure. Either way, I ended up giving this one 4 stars. The next one that I completed was the 5th one on the map, which is Obsidian Falls, to read a thriller or mystery novel. And for that, I decided to incorporate the book that I read with Gabby for the book troupe, which was 56 Days. Again, there is a live show for this as well. I had so much fun with Gabby talking about this book on the live. I'm gonna link it up above as well. But this to me was amazing. It's still a book that I think about. I loved the storyline. I really enjoyed the fact that we were reading about something that the world just went through. I know that for some people this is too soon, and I definitely understand, because it was really dark times for our nation, for our world, and we're still going through it. So I understand how some people just could not get into it or read it just yet. But for me, I like reading about just dark times in history and in our nation and in the world that have to do with diseases and things like that. So I was able to like separate myself with what we had just gone through with what was being talked about in the book, and I almost saw it as like history kind of. But again, I really enjoyed this. Here we are following a couple. They're actually fairly new in their relationship, Kiera and Oliver, and they end up meeting like at, I don't know if it's like a little supermarket, or they're like in the middle of their lunchtime, and they end up meeting at this place, and one thing leads to another. They end up talking and they end up dating. In the middle of them talking and dating, the pandemic is starting, so they're about to go on lockdown, and he decides to suggest to her, hey, do you want to move in together while we're on lockdown? I think they were, at the beginning, they were only talking about being on lockdown for 2 weeks. He's like, do you want to move in together? We can get to know each other and still see each other without having to worry about being on lockdown. And she was like, sure. But you know that at the beginning of the book, when you start the book, somebody is dead in this apartment. You don't know whether it's him or her or somebody else. You just know that they found somebody dead in this apartment. And so it was just a fun time trying to figure out who that was, what the story behind this was. And I really enjoyed getting to know Kiera and Oliver and their stories, because you know that there's some secrets, you just don't know what it is. And it was a fun time trying to figure it out. It was a little bit predictable, but not to the point where it ruined the book for me. There was a big twist where I was really surprised. I mean, this is a mystery thriller. If we need to say that there are twists and turns in the novel, it's not a spoiler. There are twists and turns in almost every mystery and thriller book. This is no exception. And so there was one of them that really took me by surprise that I was not expecting, but the majority of them were pretty predictable. Again, I'm gonna leave the live show with Gabby for the book troop up above so that you guys could check it out. But I had a really fun time with this one, and I ended up giving this one 4 stars. Then we went to The Tower of Rumination, which was a 5-star prediction. And for that, I had chosen Chasing the Boogeyman by Richard Chizmar. First, I want to start by saying that 5-star prediction, correct, checked. This was 5 stars for me. I loved this so much. If you're gonna read this book, I give you one suggestion. Go into it reading it like it's all fiction, because it is. But don't do any research. Don't look to see what's true, what's not true in any way, shape, or form until you reach the end and you read the author's notes at the end. I buddy read this with my friend Tali and Joyce, and at the beginning, when we read the foreword, it's by this guy named James Renner. And so it talks about how he was on vacation and he saw this book at the vacation home where they were staying at, and he just picked it up just to have something to read, and he ended up loving it. He talked about how he ended up contacting Richard Chizmar to see if the killer had been found. And I'm like, okay, is this a reprint? Is this what? Just go into it as if everything that you're reading is fiction, like the people aren't real, nothing, because this is a piece of metafiction, meaning that Richard Chizmar, the author, has incorporated himself in this book. So this talks about how when in the 80s, I think it's 1988 if I'm not mistaken, don't quote me, there was these slew of murders in his hometown. And he's in the middle of all of this, you know, like seeing everything going around. They're trying to figure out who this murderer is, and he is... So yeah, he just inserts himself in his town at this time while these murders are going on, and they're trying to find this guy. So that makes it really confusing for you, because you're like, oh my gosh, like, there's pictures in here of the murder scenes, of the policemen and all of that. But again, read it all as a piece of fiction, because that is what it is, and then read the author's notes, and it'll give you a little bit more of clarification on the book. Because if you start like me and right after the foreword you start researching, you're gonna get very confused, because the people are real, or at least some of the people are real. So anyways, I really enjoyed this one. I thought it was brilliantly written. I loved the whole storyline. This is based off of a real true crime case, or bits and pieces of a real true crime case. So again, I wouldn't focus so much on that aspect until after you have finished the book. 5 stars again. To me, this was brilliant. I don't know if that just made any sense, but it was 5 stars, so I loved it. Then we went into the Illyrium arc, which is our next step in the map, and this is a book with a school setting. For me, I chose Summer Suns. This is a book that came out at the end of September, and I had an arc for it. There is a whole Nightworms book party blog post written over this that I will link down below so you could see everybody's thoughts on this. I thought I was gonna like this more than I did. I already gave my copy away, that's why I don't have it, but I almost DNF'd this book. This is about this guy, I don't remember the name and I don't have it written down anywhere, but our main character, his brother basically committed suicide, so he has to go to his house, and the brother left him everything. He was like very wealthy, he had houses and properties and stuff, and he was supposed to have come to live with him in a couple of months to go to the same school that he was going to, but prior to this happening, the brother commits suicide, so he finds himself having to go to deal with everything that he has left him. But he is going there with the intentions of finding out what happened to his brother, because he does not believe that his brother committed suicide. He thinks that these new friends that he has made at this university or at this college have something to do with it. Now, the guy's friends that he ends up meeting when he comes, the brother's friends, they all participate in races and stuff. They all have like cool cars. So this is said to be part Fast and Furious. My husband and I are obsessed with Fast and Furious. Even with the last ones, we have to always go watch the movies, as ridiculous as they get, as dumb as they're getting with each movie. We're were fans of that franchise. And so when I saw that, when I was offered this book and I saw that as part of the whole plot, I was in. I have learned that I do not like to read much about racing. Now, this does have some racing in. It's not a major focal point of it. With that being said, I almost DNF'd this book because it was dragging a little bit too much. We got a lot of the brother saying, I know that he didn't commit suicide. I need to find out who killed him. I need to find out what happened. And I know he didn't commit suicide. And him going into the brother's room and feeling his presence. And then him seeing his car. And there's a lot of that grieving part from the brother on the pages that just make the story drag a little bit too much. I really did enjoy the atmosphere, and if it wasn't because NetGalley had approved the audiobook for me, I would have DNF'd it. I mean, I was seconds away from DNFing the book, and then I saw it as part of audiobooks on NetGalley and I requested it, and thankfully they accepted it because I really did enjoy the last quarter of the book. To me, the ending, and there was a scene there that I just absolutely loved, it made it worth it. As crazy as that sounds, because you're talking about a quarter part of a book, but the grieving in this book really makes it a little bit like of a downer. So it really hit my soul a little bit, like it really dampened my mood a little bit. So it is heavy in that sense. But for me, the little bit, that ending really made it worth it, in my opinion. I ended up giving it 3 stars because, like I said, for the first 75% of the book, it just wasn't working for me. But we hit one scene that just sparked this like whole love for me for the book. The atmosphere. If you want to read a super atmospheric novel, I would definitely recommend this one. Again, I gave it 3 stars.
I don't know what I have to say my rating 5 times while I talk about the book. Okay.
So now we're getting into our character traits, which are the 3 prompts that you have until April to read. But like I said, I did complete 2 of those, and the ones that I completed were my background. For my background, I chose Wilding, and that is just a book largely set in the forest or outside. I chose Something Wicked This Way Comes because my friend Carol had a read-along for this for the month of September, and I finally read it. I talk about in my TBR video how I have been trying to read this book for years and can never get past the first 20 or 30 pages. Well, I finally finished it, and this was a little bit of a disappointment for me. I thought I was gonna like it more. I found myself pretty confused sometimes. I listened to this on audio. I found it to be very atmospheric, but sometimes I was so confused that it sort of dampened the atmosphere for me. I thought that because this is largely set in a carnival, I was gonna like it more, and I didn't. There was just a disconnect for me between me and the book. I ended up giving this one 3 stars, mostly because of the atmosphere and because of the father and son relationship that is seen in this book. I really did enjoy that part. There is a part on here, and it is the only part that I tabbed out here, where it's a dialogue between him and his father, him being the main character in the novel. I can't remember his name right now. But there's this whole dialogue between the father and him, and I just found it so endearing and so amazing. That scene and that dialogue between these two really made the book for me, and then the atmosphere as well. You can't deny that the atmosphere is here for this book. So a little bit of a disappointment, but still a 3-star read.
I could have given it 2 stars, really.
The last prompt that I finished for the Magical Readathon was Province for my character, which is Eartheria, and it's basically a book with fae or elven characters because, like I said, my character is an elf.
Because how can I not choose an elf? I'm obsessed with elves. And
so for this one, I ended up reading The Call by Peter O'Gillen. Okay, this actually, my friend Maisha got it for me for my birthday from my wish list. So thank you so much, Maisha, if you're watching this. I mean, when I read the synopsis for this, I was like, I need this book because it deals with fae, and it says 3 minutes, you wake up alone in a horrible land, a horn sounds, the call has begun. 2 minutes. I don't know. I listened to this on audiobook as well because there's a lot of like words that I couldn't understand. So I can't remember how to say this, but it's basically the Fae. The Fae have a certain name in this book and I can't pronounce it, but I'm gonna say Fae. The Fae are close. They're the most beautiful and terrible people you've ever seen, and they've seen you. 1 minute. Nessa will be called soon. No one thinks she has any chance to survive, but she's determined to prove them wrong. Time's up. Could you survive the call? Basically what this is in the human world, kids start going missing, but they realize that it takes 3 minutes for them to come back. And now they either come back alive or they come back dead. And if they come back alive, they're changed. They're changed in one way, shape, or form. When they leave, their clothes are left behind. So they end up going to this other world naked. And so they have, in those 3 minutes, the Fae, which is the Siddle or the Sidle, I can't really remember how that is pronounced, they know that there's a human on their land and they go on the hunt for them and they want to eat them. They want to have a little snack with them. And they're just known to be evil, but there is a whole backstory on why there's this war between the humans and the Fae. And so Nessa is our main character. You actually see a lot of kid characters. There are a lot of characters in this, but ultimately Nessa is our main character. And she has a flaw with her legs. I think when she was little, she had some sort of sickness or something that left her a little bit like she... can't remember exactly, but she has like a limp. She can't run right. She was just left messed up from that sickness that she had. And so that's why they think that she will never make it when she gets called, because it's not a matter of if you get called, it's when you get called. They all get called. And so they're all in this school to help them learn how to fight and how to survive their time in this land. It was pretty interesting, but it wasn't what I thought it was gonna be. It could get a little bit confusing at times with so many characters and so much history and so much to learn, because you have to learn a lot, especially about the Fae world. They also have another language that they're taught in this school, so it's a lot of information for a very short book. But either way, it was pretty interesting. I really did enjoy spending the time at the other land. You get little glimpses, and then at the end you get like a whole bam of their world, of the Fae world. I really did like the characters, but like I said, a little bit of the times it was confusing, and it was confusing enough to pull me out of the story. Either way, I ended up giving this one 3 stars because I really did enjoy the worlds and just the whole history of it as well. Now let's talk about all the other books that I read for the month. So at the beginning of the month, my friend Jacqueline had the Thrill to the Weekend readathon, which I participated in, and it was just reading thriller books for 72 hours, as much as you can. There was only one prompt, and it was to read a book with green on the cover, which the group book had green on the cover, so you could have just read that one book and you would have been fine. But I ended up reading 2 books for the readathon. Why did I say that so abrupt? The first one being the group book, which was Infinite by Brian Freeman. And the only reason why I did participate in the group book, because I usually don't participate in group books when there's a readathon, just because I'm trying to read the books that I have and I'm not trying to buy any new books for the time being. It was because it was part of Kindle Unlimited, and they had the Audible audiobook for free with the Kindle Unlimited edition. So I ended up listening to it, and let me tell you guys, I am so glad that this was the group book and that I got to read it, because this was a 5-star read for me. I was obsessed when I finished it. So this is one of those books that have like alternate realities or alternate universes kind of story. This book follows Dylan, and all that you know at the beginning of the book is that he has gotten into an accident. You know that his wife drowns in this accident. He's continuing his life, but every time that he looks somewhere, he happens to see a shadow of himself, which is kind of weird to him. He continues seeing like doppelgangers of himself. And so one day he works at this hotel, and they're having this event, and he comes across this psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist has told him that he's actually under her care. He's doing some kind of hypnotherapy, and through this hypnotherapy, he has uncovered other worlds, like alternate realities. And one of these characters, one of these Dylans, is trying to stake claim to his world. it can be confusing, and it's this whole thing, and I don't want to say too much because I don't want to spoil it, but I found this book so engaging. I found it so engrossing. I was so intrigued. I was like, I would gasp at times because I was like, oh my gosh. It was like watching an action movie. I really enjoyed it. I had a really fun time in the Discord discussing the book with everybody. Again, I gave this one 5 stars. And then the second book that I read for this readathon was The Last Thing He Told Me by Laura Dave. I know this has very mixed reviews. I loved this. This was super fast paced for me. I could not put it down. I just wanted to know what happened. I thought I was going to be kind of like disappointed with the outcome of the whole story, but I wasn't. But maybe I should tell you what this book is about. This story follows Hannah and Owen. Well, really Hannah for the most part, but you know that she is in a new relationship. Not in a new relationship, but she's about to move in with this guy, Owen. You know, they just love each other. They have a really good relationship and they decide to move in together. But the thing is that Owen has a daughter. So she would become a stepmom to Bailey. Bailey is she's a teenager. She doesn't want to know anything about her stepmom. That's not her mom. She does not care. She treats her kind of bad. And Hannah just wants to make Bailey happy. She wants to get on her good side. She's always cooking her the foods that she wants. She's always making sure that Bailey is comfortable. If she feels like she doesn't want Hannah around, like if Bailey doesn't want Hannah around, like if Hannah gets those feelings, she'll say, hey, look, I'll leave. I'll let you and your dad. So she's very mindful of trying to make Bailey feel comfortable. I'm getting everybody's name confused. But one day, Owen goes missing, like just missing. Somebody knocks on her door and gives her a note and says it's from Owen. He said he passed by the school and he told me to come and give you this note and that he has to leave. And Hannah is like, what is going on? And in the note, it says, protect her. So immediately she knows that he's talking about Bailey. Next thing you know, when she goes to pick up Bailey, Bailey has like this duffel bag full of money that her father has left for her in her locker. And so it's just a story of uncovering what is going on with Owen. You know that as she's waiting for Bailey to come to the car, there is news on the radio that the company that her boyfriend works for, that Owen works for, is under investigation. The FBI is involved. And so she's like, well, I guess this is why Owen is missing. And so they just go on this whole thing to find out what happened to Owen and what are the secrets that are behind this whole disappearance. And what they get is much more than just Owen's backstory. I really enjoyed Hannah and Bailey's dynamic in this. I really liked when they got together. They end up going to Austin, Texas, and I love reading about my beloved Texas because there's times where I really miss Texas, and the people in Texas is just such a different world. But they end up taking a trip to Austin to uncover secrets, and they find out a lot there. And I really like the growth between their relationship as stepmother and daughter. I really loved the conclusion to the ending. At first, I was kind of like iffy with it because I'm like, damn, that's it? Not really that's it, but I feel like I wanted more of a resolution, but I was content with how it ended. Like I said, this has very mixed reviews. Not a lot of people like it. I've heard a lot of people say how it was slow for them. For me, it was super fast-paced, and I ended up enjoying it so much. And like I said, I love both of the characters and their growth and development throughout the novel. I ended up giving this one 5 stars. Then I ended up reading the true crime book for the month for the Bookish True Crime Club, and I'm so excited because I always try to get to the books of the month for the Bookish True Crime Club, which is ran by Ashley over on Instagram. And I never get to them, but I was able to get to The Pale-Faced Lie by David Crow. And this is a story, it's a true crime story about this family and all these lies behind this dad and this relationship that this dad had with their 3 kids. This kid, David Crow, he's not a kid anymore, he's an older man, but the life that this kid, David Crow, and his brother and sister lived under this awful father is just beyond me. This isn't a true crime book where there was like multiple murders or they lived with a serial killer or anything like that, but his dad was a vile man. So much so that this man separated the mom from these 3 kids so like rudely and so cold-heartedly that it just broke my heart. And I'm not saying that the mom was any better, because there was issues with the mom, but the way that these 3 kids were ripped from their mother was just insane to me. The manipulation that this man put these 3 kids through, I mean, I would have been scarred for life, and I'm sure they were. David does talk about how he was able to grow and how he was able to let go of a lot of things that his father has done to them. But I think that the worst part of this book for me is his dad ends up meeting this other woman that ends up becoming their stepmother, and this woman was horrible and would treat these kids horribly. Now granted, there wasn't any hitting or anything, not that I could remember, maybe from the husband to the wives, or to from their dad to whoever he was married to at the time, or whoever he was with. I know there was physical abuse there, but there was never any physical abuse towards the kids, but there was emotional abuse that even the stepmother was part of. She was just, in her mind, she was trying to create discipline, but it was just harsh to read. It really made me sad to read throughout what these kids went through, and it was just a phenomenal story. It's part of Kindle Unlimited if you guys want to read it. It's, again, it's not one where there's a lot of gore or a lot of death per se. There is some killing and stuff happening in the book, but there's not a lot of it. It's more of this emotional abuse that these kids went through throughout their growing up. I ended up giving this book 4 stars. Then I finally read Credence. I loved Punk 57 so much that I was like, you know what? I'm gonna give Credence a try, and if it's just not for me, it's not for me. 5 stars. I loved Credence so much. It is such a problematic book, you guys. Like, I'm not gonna sit here and tell you that this book is like perfect. I'm not gonna sit here and tell you, I'm not even gonna suggest you go read it, because it's not gonna be for everybody. I myself don't have a problem with problematic books. I tell you guys this all the time, that my books are fiction. They're fiction for a reason, and they could be the most fucked up fiction ever, and I'm not gonna see a problem with it. I mean, I'm gonna see a problem with it. Like, I'm not gonna go living life with what I'm reading. I'm not gonna take advice from these books, but it's fiction. It's what it is, and I'm okay with it. I talk about Dead Inside maybe like a year ago, and I don't recommend that book for anybody, and that, to me, as of today, that is the most effed up book that I have ever read in my entire life, and I would never recommend that to anybody. Credence is another one, although Credence is not as bad as Dead Inside, but this is another one that's not going to be for everybody. If you read the synopsis, or you see that somebody says like, hey, this is not going to be for anybody, and you know that you have problems with problematic books, stay away from it, because it's not going to be for you. I loved it. I loved the relationships in the book. I love the character development that our main character has. I buddy read this with my friend Tali, and at the beginning of the book, I remember us commenting on how this book was just taking so long to read. Now, mind you, Punk 57, I think it's like 200 plus pages, like in the lower 200 plus mark pages, and that was a perfect size for me. I flew through it. I read it in one day. It was fast. It was quick. I loved it. Credence is a 400-page book, which kind of shocked me when we went into it. I wasn't expecting a 400-page book. With that being said, it takes a long time to get to the nitty-gritty of the book. I feel like this book could have been cut in half and it would have been perfect. I still gave it 5 stars. The beginning of the book drags a lot. We have a lot about Tiernan. Tiernan is our main character. At the beginning of the book, you see that she is going through grief, because I say grief real loosely, because her parents committed suicide in bed one day. I believe the dad was sick and was about to die, and they both decided to go off together. And it's just following Tiernan as she's processing this. Now, Tiernan has never been very loved. Their parents were all about themselves, and they sort of like would push her aside. The only one that she would get love from was her nanny, in a way. I guess she was her nanny. Her nanny loved her so much, and she would see that she was missing love, because she would see how her parents were towards her. And so there's a lot of like this grievance inside of her that she just does not get over for the first 200 pages. She gets a call from her uncle. He's like, listen, I'm so sorry that your parents died, but your care has been left to me. He is her dad's stepbrother. So they're related. They're related. And she's never met this uncle and she's never heard of him. She was kind of like surprised, like, wait, who are you? But whatever, she takes him up on it and she's like, let's go. She ends up going with them to Colorado. Now these three guys are used to being up there. They're players, they have women, they are rude, they are gross, and here she is in need of love and in need of attention, and she goes to live with these three buffoons. I loved it so much. That's all I'm going to talk about because I've been talking about this book for like 10 minutes and I can sit here and talk about this book for 25 minutes, but I loved the character development through all of the characters, starting from Tiernan to Jake, which is the uncle, to Caleb, which is one of the cousins, and through Noah, which is another one of the cousins. So it's Jake, Noah, and Caleb are the three guys that live up there, the father and the two sons, and then Tiernan, which is the niece. I love the character development between all of them. I love the backstory between all of them. What I am going to say though is that I loved the way the book started in the sense of her parents. That was such a dark story that I needed more of, was the love between the two parents. Very effed up what they did to Tiernan and how they treated her, but I wanted to know a little bit more of that story and not of her grieving because of the treatment that she got, if that makes sense. Anyways, 5 stars. And then the last and final book that I read was The Quiet Boy. I say book because it's literally an hour long. It's an audiobook. When we were in the Horror in 24 live for The Forgotten Island, my friend Mandy, which you should go check out, Mandy's Morgue of Horror. She has the best horror movie recommendations, and she's been in a little bit of a slump. What did I just say? She's been in a little bit of a slump, so she hasn't been doing a lot of reading, but she's been talking a lot about horror movies, and she has like a whole 31 days of horror movie recommendations for October. So go check her out. I will link her down below. But she talks about how she listened to this audiobook, The Quiet Boy, and that there's a movie coming out or is already out based on this book or short story that's named Antlers. And so she says how the audiobook is amazing. It's like a whole production. There's like music and sounds and the narrator's voice. And so I went to check it out, and it is an hour long and it was phenomenal. I'm not going to talk a lot about it because, like I said, it is an hour long audiobook. So anything that I say is gonna be a spoiler, but just know that it's about a quiet boy and the story behind this boy. There's this teacher and there's this like weird, strange boy that always smells kind of weird and it's very quiet, and she dives into his story, and what she finds is a little bit creepy, to say the least. There was moments I was cleaning and there was times where the voice and the music was so creepy that it would say like, oh, and she looked behind her, and I would like look behind me because I could have sworn I was in the middle of this audiobook. It was fantastic. And I ended up giving this one 4 stars. And the only reason why I gave it 4 stars and not 5 was because it was just too short for me. I wish it would have been more than a short story. So yeah, I mean, I had such a fun time with The Quiet Boy. So thank you, Mandy, for that recommendation. So that's it, you guys. Those are all the books that I read for the month of September. It was a fantastic reading month. I enjoyed my birthday. I enjoyed my birthday reading. September is just my favorite month overall, and I just enjoyed it so much. Let me know in the comment section down below what was your favorite book that you read in September and your least favorite book. Let's chat books down below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys in my next one. Bye.